You say that under the present regime of President Marcos, life has moved from being hell to purgatory. What do you mean?
President Marcos did better than people expected. And part of that is because a lot of his administration, this is Marcos Jr., right? So he cares what the international community thinks. It's a chance to vindicate his family name. Imagine Marcos arresting a Duterte, right? He did many things that I would not have expected. There have been no new cases against Rappler and me. We haven't been targeted. We were banned from the palace under the last few years of Duterte. We're back in the palace. We're part of the press pool. I mean, look at how far we were pushed back, right? And then in terms of the extrajudicial killings, are they still happening? Yes, but not as much. So, you know, some human rights groups will say, but Maria, why are you saying that? Well, you give credit where credit is due. We're moved from hell to purgatory. It was a low bar. I think the other part, at a time when impunity reigns and when rule of law seems so weak, to have had the Philippine government listen to an ICC, this court, this order to arrest through Interpol a president, of a former president of the Philippines. The first time it's ever happened, that had the nation on tenterhooks. And the government did the right thing. And actually, I was flying in from New York right the weekend before when I'd heard that warrant had been issued. And I was like, oh my God, the Philippines is rule of law. And I'm leaving a country where rule of law was breaking down, right? So I have hopes. I worry that if the global north falls, if democracy falls off the cliff, what does that mean for the global south?
Final arguments are being put in the case of the Hong Kong media owner Jimmy Lai today. What message would his conviction send to the world about Hong Kong?
Press freedom is dead. I mean...
Is it already dead?
Oh, yeah. In Hong Kong. Jimmy Lai didn't expect the world to turn upside down as quickly. With power and money that he had, he thought freedom of speech would be his. And when they walked into that newsroom, there were 200 plus, we watched in horror. Because up until then, I don't know if you remember the umbrella revolution, like the protests in Hong Kong, while the brutal drug war was going on, we looked to Hong Kong for hope. And when Jimmy Lai was arrested, that's when it sent a chilling effect through the entire region. I hope to hear some good news. He's an older gentleman who isn't healthy, right? And I hope China gives some mercy to a guy who just is speaking his mind.
You link the rise of many of the strongmen politicians around the globe to social media, including Duterte. When you started your online news service, Rappler, you were of the view that the internet and social media would be a force for good, and you clearly don't think that now. What's gone wrong and how is it being used against us all?
The design of these social media platforms that are meant to connect us, right? That's what they say, they connect the world, have actually hacked our biology for profit. So they figured out that the goal is to keep us scrolling because they make more money as we scroll. And by design, it spreads lies faster than facts. And if you incite fear, anger, and hate, it spreads even faster. So the incentive structure of the tech companies for profit have turned the incentive structure of the world upside down. And it doesn't just impact the individual user, right? So they can now reach to the cellular level of a democracy, change the way we feel, which changes the way we look at the world, which changes the way we act and the way we vote. And you can see that as of this year, March this year, VDEM in Sweden said that 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. We're literally electing illiberal leaders democratically. I guess what I'm worried about is that by design, we're killing democracy. And it takes so much more energy and effort to reclaim our rights because we've been insidiously manipulated. And it's not just the kids who are being manipulated, it's me and you. This is the platform used to attack us so that we cannot do our jobs. So it's a breakdown of facts, truth, and trust, right? I've said this over and over since 2016 when I started seeing the data. If these platforms spread lies faster than facts, right? People can't tell the difference. So without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these three, you have no shared reality. We can't begin to have a conversation. We can't begin to solve any problems. And we have existential ones like climate change. We can't have journalism. We can't have democracy.
Donald Trump seems to have learned something from leaders like Duterte about social media. But how much more dangerous for the world is it to have the President of the United States engaging in the manipulation of truth on a day-to-day basis?
I haven't given up hope that Americans will wake up. I know what fear does, right? But when you come together, if Americans can pull this off, they can pull us back from the brink. If America falls off the edge of the cliff, it will drag us down. It's death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like AP stood by, they're not going to call it Gulf of America, right? It's these small things. You cannot voluntarily give up your rights, because when you do, you will have a harder time clawing them back later.
As you say, your mantra really is facts, truth and trust. And yet the world now seems to be operating in a world where the public doesn't get any of those, and leaders, including President Trump, and not just on social media, feel no particular obligation to facts or truth. And it seems to be working for them. Is there a tipping point in this process?
We have to remember, right, regardless of what happens in the United States, to Australians who are here, who are you? What are the values you stand for? I think our problem today is, will the world meet the challenge the same way that post-Hiroshima, when the atom bomb exploded, the world came together to prevent the worst of humanity. This is another one of those instances. This is our generation. This is our time. Will our leaders come together in this, right? Because what we've seen is impunity, the violation of, what is the phrase that they'll always use? The international rules-based order. In fact, impunity reigns now, right? You have Putin, Netanyahu, you have all of the violence in Africa, you have Myanmar in my part of the world, and many more, right? You have the threat that China will follow. And their tactics are the same tactics used by the tech CEOs, right? And they're captured. So we play a role in this, and just easily the 4 ways: media capture, academic capture, NGO capture, state capture. I think America ticks all of those, right? But in every single one, the way to stop all of that is actually coming down to you, the citizen. We've never been in this kind of situation before, where you feel helpless, but the power is in you. So what I'm hoping is that the world rises up to the challenge. We did before, but in a far more fragmented world, I'm afraid.
You mentioned Netanyahu. This week we all saw the footage of the shocking killing of 20 people, including 5 journalists, on an outside staircase of a hospital in Gaza.
Yeah.
Yet the Israeli government initially suggested this was just a tragic mishap, and also denies there's starvation in Gaza. What do journalists do in such a world? Does a country that doesn't let journalists in to cover a story and seems to actively be targeting them lose its right to be called a democracy?
I sit on the board of the Committee to Protect Journalists, and I'm so proud of the group because they've publicly called for an end to this kind of violence. Especially, there's almost 200 journalists killed in Gaza. Specific targeting, Israel never held to account. 100 out of the 197, by the last count, over 185 are Palestinian journalists. So what are we all going to do? We're just going to watch. And that's a challenge to governments, right? I know it's complex. We all know it's complex, but it's also about power and money. So you got to get your act together. Where's our humanity? Will we allow humanity to win? Or will it lose? And if it does, that's on our conscience. I never understood how 6 million people were killed in the concentration camps, right? That was, and here we are again, it's happening in our watch. In Tagalog, there's a phrase, urong sulong. You take one step forward, you take 2 steps back. This is what I'm hoping, right? New international alliances, new ways, the same way that after 9/11, the post-Cold War era, the security dynamics had to be reframed.
When you say we need to step up, what would that look like?
I think new kinds of international alliances need to be put in place. I can see this. I just came from Brazil, where BRICS isn't quite working because it's still an old way. Many of us in the global south still dealt with a post-colonial, like the trauma of colonialism. It's like, get over it. We got to move. Where are we in the world today? Where's the wind blowing? How can you get groups, countries who believe in the same things? And the first attempt I saw at this is the information integrity, the Declaration on Information Integrity in 2022 on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The G77, Kenya just passed 2 major initiatives at the UN around artificial intelligence. That's G77, the Global South, right? In the UN on September 22, you have an alliance of nations coming together, at least 38, if not more, that will look at institutions, the online manipulations, and getting rid of poverty. Because what we're seeing globally now is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they're fallen off the cliff. But can we still work for the greater good? Do we believe that that should be the way it is? Or is it might makes right? Are we going back to the age of the emperors, right? I don't think Australia's there. So, yeah, step up, man.
You were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for Rappler's expose of President Duterte's use of violence and other abuses of power, as well as its documentation of how social media has been used to spread fake news, harass opponents and manipulate public discourse. How do you feel about the idea of Donald Trump getting the Nobel Peace Prize?
You know, I've gotten to know the Norwegian Nobel Committee, and their head is a young man who was, well, he's younger, he's the next generation, and his last task was Utøya. Do you know the Utøya Island? Anders Breivik killed the students on that island, right? And the head, Jürgen, he healed, he worked to heal society for years, right? So I can imagine how he would react. It's hard for me to comment. You know, the good part about the Nobel, you can nominate, right? If you've gotten but the Norwegian Nobel Committee, they don't actually tell you how they choose. But I know them well now, and I can only imagine how they would react.